will assist to answer to your questions. There will be a short briefing for the Graduate Diploma in HRM programs after the Masterclass. Now, tonight we have a very interesting topic, future proving through employee engagement, where I'm sure all of us will be able to relate. So what do companies have to do to level up on employee engagement so as to retain and attract talents in this post-pandemic era? And how will it affect or impact on HR and what they have to do to meet these constant changing demands? All right, so to get the answer, let me introduce the speaker for today. Mr. Eugene Lam has more than 20 years of experience in human resource management, having held both geographic and business partner HR leadership roles. He has led HR country and functional teams across emerging markets such as Asia Pacific, Latin America, Central Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And his competencies includes broad spectrum of human capital areas like HR strategies, talent acquisitions, learning and development, performance management, compensation and rewards, and transitions management and resource management. So without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Eugene Lam. Eugene, over to you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sean. Hey, good evening to everyone. Thanks for taking this time out in the evening on a Thursday, right? So it's great to meet all of you. Let me just share my screen, and we can get on the way. Okay. Okay, brilliant. So I hope you guys can see my screen. Okay, very good. I see some nods. Thank you very much. Going forward here, I will tell all of you that I will not be able to see anyone else as I'm just looking at my slides. Okay, so again, Sean suggested you type in the questions. I'm quite happy for you anytime, right, to sort of just speak up and ask any question. It's a small group today, so I'm very happy to make this as intimate and as close and engaging as possible for all of us. Okay, so firstly, maybe a bit of background. I mean, Sean gave, hey, thanks for that, Sean. He gave a bit of an introduction, but I'll tell you a bit of myself and my background so that you probably can appreciate the journey that I've been through, and that what I'm going to share with you is probably accumulation of the war stories and the journey that I've gone through with some of these organizations. I did start my career with the military. I don't know if I don't want to assume that everyone here on this call is from Singapore, but for those who are here would know that we have served national service, and I took a scholarship with the armed forces here in Singapore. So I was bonded. I did a business degree in the National University of Singapore, and thereafter I went back to serve the armed forces for 7 years. And I would say the rest is quite history. I decided after my bond to leave military service. I started my career actually with PricewaterhouseCoopers in the consulting business. It was an interesting time, but because this was just probably the second year after Pricewaterhouse and Coopers and Lybrand had merged. So those were the years where we saw a lot of consolidation among the big four. So PwC was formed. I joined them, and it was in an era where the government practice, right, or the public sector practice within PwC was trying to sort of build its portfolio. The Singapore government at that time also was very open to sort of engage consultants and advisors, right, because many of the organizations and stat boards were trying to change their culture. Many of them sort of became statutory boards, and so they're trying to learn, right, what it means to be instead of a regulator, right, but to be a facilitator of the industry. So there was a lot of this cultural shifts, and I was quite happy to share that I worked with clients like NParks, NParks was one of our major. With who else was it? with in fact the NUS, with CAS. So these were some of the clients that came our way. So it was very interesting to see how these organizations tried to change and work towards transformation. But I spent about 3 years in consulting, and then after that I decided, okay, what should I do with the rest of my life, right? I spent my earlier years after the military with consulting, and it was all in the people area, and I decided maybe I should remain in the people business. And so my first HR job was with Accenture. And of course, to tell you a bit of my age, to give you some hints, right? When I joined them, they were still called Anderson Consulting. I was there as the HR manager for Singapore. And that's how I basically started my HR career. Of course, they later IPO'd and became Accenture. And the rest, I would say, is history. I spent most of my other years in my career being a HR business partner, essentially supporting, I would say, business leaders, general managers. And these could be business leaders running countries, running regions. And as you can see, although I stayed mainly in IT and high-tech companies, I did do a small stint in FMCG, 4 years with Kimberly-Clark. And fast forward, I've now just joined ST Engineering just in September last year. And as you would have seen, I head up talent for the corporation, and I also support the commercial business. So that's a bit of my background. I would say that not all of the journey has been smooth. Obviously there were always bumpy rides. Some of the companies that you see here, if you have been reading the papers, you would know that they've had their own fair share of challenges. For HR folks like myself going through that, I can understand, or you can appreciate the journey that it has been, not only for HR and for myself, but also the business leaders leading these teams and employees themselves. Okay, so with that, after over, I guess, as Sean said, almost 20 years of going through this, I was very happy to sort of address this topic today on future proofing and employee engagement. So I'm going to attempt to cover 3 things today. Perhaps I'll start off with just understanding the context, right? What's happened in the last 12, 18 months. And as I share this, I just maybe ask all of you to sort of reflect and think about your own organizations. What's been going through your organization in terms of, employees, what employees are going through, what the business is going through, right? As you know, many industries were impacted and so on. So something for you to reflect as I talk through the context. And of course, very quickly, I like to switch gears to talk about what I think key, I would say, elements, right, of employee engagement and how we can use employee engagement, right, to help future-proof us. Okay, and of course, I thought I shouldn't end the call or this session here without sharing what I think are some of the priorities for HR. And as you look at those priorities, and I took this from a Gartner research recently, and I thought it was quite relevant, and I hope that's something that you can also relate to. Okay, so good. With that, let me just cover what I think are some of the contextual issues facing organizations and employees. Okay, let's maybe talk about the first. Yeah, the first context is really this whole COVID pandemic. I suppose it's very timely that this slide is put up. Those of you who are based in Singapore, I don't know, you may not have heard the Prime Minister speak to us today, right? And how we are transitioning, clearly evolving, right, in terms of new measures, as we face this COVID-19 endemic now, right? So, but look, if you think back the last 12 months, I'm sure some of these terms here are not new to all of you, right? I think it's very not uncommon to hear someone say, hey, you're mute. And if you see some of these terms here, I tell you, even as recent as 2 years ago, I don't think these are common terms, right? Stay home notices, please keep your hands washed, mask, oh my gosh, right? So, it's sort of this whole pandemic has preoccupied all of us. And obviously, while I say this in a bit of jest, it's been very tough, right? I think personally for some of us or all of us, I would share that even in my own experience, just before joining SC Engineering, I was at a company called Danaher. In 2020, right, very quickly in Q2, right, in 2020, when COVID started to move across the globe very quickly, we took very swift action. So I want you to think about it. I don't know what's happened across in your companies, but at Danaher, in the business unit I belong to, we basically downsized by 40%. Okay, that's a pretty hefty number, right? The biggest numbers came out of Japan and India, at least within Asia Pacific, which I was covering. It was a very painful time for me personally because seeing my colleagues and unfortunately being HR facilitating some of the exits, including the business leader or leaders who are running the region. So it's a very, very testing and difficult time, right? So while this slide may have some jest in it, but it has really impacted lives, right? Friends that I know of personally also. And of course, the other context I like to quickly share is what companies started to do, right? How did they start to respond? Although this, I sort of did a bit of research, although this was a report in June 2020, I want to say that, look, the top 3 responses by companies, right? I don't think it's far different, right, from 2020 to 2021, right? There was clearly a quick change, or I would say turnaround, right, in terms of remote work. I think it's those of you who are based in Singapore, you'll know that, yeah, that's changed quite a bit, right? Because people are starting to move back to offices. And I think with effect next week, if I read the news correctly, it's fine if we have up to 75%, right, of employee population back in offices. So, but this whole remote work, and of course, they were suddenly, right, some companies did very well, right? The semiconductor companies, obviously, because all the requirement for chips and so on started to go up. Zoom as a company, I think their stock prices really hit the roof. So, so for some it was great, all because of remote work. And I don't know how you guys did it, but I've seen companies like mine at that point looking at shift schedule, right? Schedule A, schedule B, and so on. So that was a bit of a preoccupation. Of course, the other thing that happened was the whole focus on health and safety. That became a priority. I think many organizations looked at that and felt that, hey, look, one reason why we should keep employees at home was because, yeah, it was quite unnerving, right? At least in 2020. Things, of course, got better. So, if you look at some of these reactions or responses for companies, have a look at them, right? Because I'm sure each of you in your own space will have had different responses, right? But by and large, I think it covered. I did mention to you about headcount reductions in my own company. I did not mention that prior to the headcount reductions, we took very tough stance, right? Because we were not making enough revenues, and many corporations' priority was to protect cash, right? Which was main thing, right? And what does protect cash means? Well, I mean, personally for myself, I had to take a salary cut. I mean, there were certain, I suppose, levels in organizations. I took a salary cut in March, almost immediately in April. they had to force us to go on no pay leave. I don't want to use the word forced, right? But obviously, the way it was communicated, so many of us. So those of you in HR will know this, right? If you do your mathematics, what does it mean by a salary cut and then followed by no pay leave? It's probably equivalent to maybe 20-25% pay cut, depending on how deep the unpaid leave was, right? So many organizations went through a tremendous time, right? Very, very bumpy time. Okay. So these were some of the responses. I wouldn't say too much about governmental actions. Again, I think I can be candid about this. After a while, even as a HR leader, I got kind of confused with some of the, I would say, measures, right? The reporting measures. I think we started with, I think now it's at least called Protocol 1, 2, 3, right? But before that, we had health risk warning, health risk alert. I don't know how many terms they were, but to be honest, it was quite tough keeping track, right? But anyway, these were some responses, right? Whether it was by corporations or whether it was by governments, right? And of course, I was looking after HR for Asia Pacific. I saw how the Japanese did it. I saw how the India government did it. So it was all too obviously very challenging for HR, right? In those 2 years, because you're trying to come up with a global HR policy, and yet you have to be very sensitive to governmental actions, right? Because the way COVID was spreading was it sort of differed market to market. Yeah. So that's sort of the second context. Okay. The third is employees. Okay. In a Mercer report, I think it was quite clear that when they did this survey, right, of how employees were feeling, you will realize some of these terms that you see here is no surprise to any of us, right? Again, sharing a very personal story, it was very uncertain times. Some of you here may be privileged enough not to have a mortgage. Fortunately, I do have one, including, a family that you have to support and so on. And it was a very uncertain time. And of course, speaking to friends, and it was also a time where I think many employees started to reflect, right? Because, COVID, you're staying back home. Obviously you have a lot of time to reflect on what you want to do in life, and seeing, especially in companies where you start to downsize, right? So there was a lot of, I would say, introspection and reflection by employees. And especially if you meet ones who have lost their jobs and they're out there looking for their jobs, very unfortunately, those who are at least at that point, right, in the airline industry and in hospitality, very, very tough time. Okay, for everyone. I know, of course, close friends who tell me that one of the biggest groups impacted are their parents. Especially if they're elderly and so on. We sort of take for granted these things, but obviously if it affects family members, it also affects our employees, right, and their productivity, right? Which leads me then to the fourth context, right, which obviously with the new way of working, right, given COVID and people were working from home, and not every company is digital ready, right, to ready that. I know teachers in Singapore really struggle. So, either you're not digitally ready, also managers are not as familiar as to how do you sort of lead people now without actually seeing them in person, right? So there's a lot of time for adjustment, right? And of course, employees being anxious themselves, and there's this feeling of well, it says connected here, but there's also a feeling of disconnection, right? And all this, I included this word here, the Great Resignation, because I think many of you would have read reports. There are more than one report on this, on this interesting phenomena this past year, right? Of this migration of folks or exit of employees, right? And look, I think it's also a culmination as I look at my own business and I look at my own employees and speaking to those who have left, and Everyone sort of has their own sort of journeys, and this, I would say, output of reflection, right, has resulted in, I think, right, this phenomenon called, the Great Resignation. Okay, so I'm going to sort of ask us to just reflect, right? I mean, I shared just the current contextual issues of the last 12 to 18 months, but if you think through this in your own organization, and just think through, right, what business leaders had to go through, what employees had to go through, and of course, when they see the news, right, every other day, right, it does sort of paint quite a pessimistic outlook. So you got to think it from the point of the employee, right? He's looking up and he's looking at downsizing, or he's looking at actions the company is taking. Then he's looking at, his fellow colleagues leaving, and generally, a slowdown in the economy, right? So it sort of culminates, and I think for each of us in your own companies, it will be different. The experience will be different, but I think clearly, I don't think anyone is not affected, at least through the last 12 to 18 months. And with that, I maybe can bring us now to the heart of the topic, which is, how do you future-proof organizations by enabling this topic called employee engagement? I want to believe that I'm not able to see everyone here and which organization you're from, but I want to believe that we have business leaders and HR leaders, and some of these things that I share here should not be new to any of you. But I'm going to share some of the things that I've seen sort of work, and where I think organizations, if you have not looked at those areas, it's a good time to pivot, right? So I'm going to suggest sort of, when you think about employee engagement, right, what enables this? And I'm going to suggest three things, right, around talent and people. And for us to reflect, right, when you engage an employee, and as you know, this term has been, I've seen that switch a few times, employee engagement to employee experience to, I've seen this term switch, but it's something for us to reflect, right, on this whole people area, right? When you say engagement of employees, right, what does that actually mean, right? How do you engender employee experience, right? And I'll talk through a few things around the environment that we create for our people. What are events? Well, I suppose the word here is events, right? But what are high touch points, right, in an employee's life cycle, right, that we can look at closely to enhance that experience? I think the other component that we can't avoid is leadership, right? In fact, I think if you read anywhere else, it's almost at the core, right, of engagement, right? As they say, if you get the right leader in an organization, you get the right leaders in teams, right? That's going to drive extremely high engagement. I think those of you who read Satya Nadella, I'm quite a fan of his. He's the CEO of Microsoft. A strong proponent on leading with empathy, and how do you sort of build trust in organizations, right, and purpose. So I found that this area of leadership is one of the strongest, right, in terms of building engagement, and we'll talk more about that. Okay, and the final piece is, of course, organization. If you want to future-proof your company, you cannot avoid this point on organizational capability, the systems, and how do you sort of enable culture, right, in your organization to enhance, obviously, engagement and helping your company sort of tide through the future. Okay, so let me maybe discuss each of these areas, and I'll be keen later on to hear your views and your own experience, right? So we can sort of learn from each other. So there are sort of a couple of components here under talent. And if you think about how do you future-proof a company, right? And by the way, it's a big topic, and I think it's a code that I'm continuing to try and break, right, or crack this code. But I found that organizations who hire for talent and not just for skills, right, you sort of help to future-proof yourself. I'm going to pick the example of the time I was in Kimberly-Clark. Kimberly-Clark, as you know, is FMCG. If you're not familiar, brands like Huggies, Kleenex, Scott's, Cortex, all these paper-based products, they're actually manufactured by Kimberly-Clark. In Asia Pacific, where I was working in, they had a strong view, right, that whenever you hire someone, it cannot be that you hire a person just for that job. In your selection process, you need to be able to hire for talent. In other words, do you see the person 2 jobs ahead, right? Not just for the current jobs, but 2 jobs ahead. And I'm just proud to say that at least in my 4 years there, we have moved, or I have moved cross-border just within Asia Pacific, right? No less than 30 people. It may not sound like a very big number, right, for an organization with about 10,000 people in Asia Pac, but that includes manufacturing and their factories and all that, right? But to me, it was because when we hired anybody, at least at the senior manager levels and above, we were very conscious that they had to be one of the questions we always ask is, are you mobile? Right? Because if you're not, and if you're taking a very significant leadership role, then that would be a challenge for Kimberly-Clark, right? And I'm happy to say that I just pick you a very simple example. The sales leader of Philippines, I had met him when I joined in 2018 and or 2017. He was this bright young sales director. After 2 years, we had moved him to be the general manager of Singapore. Singapore is not very big compared to Philippines in terms of a consumer market, but he moved. And after 2 years, just as I left, or after I left, he texted me and said, hey, look, I'm heading back to the Philippines to be the managing director for KC Philippines. A perfect example. Now, unfortunately, he's no more with Kimberly-Clark. He's now in Heineken. I suppose he prefers selling beers than paper-based products, but it's a great example, right? And I suppose I shared that I had no less than 30 examples of this very fact. And I will tell you this, right? One of the beauty in a strategy like that is that when you look, 4 to 8 years ahead, you actually have your pipeline ready. And I found it to be very powerful because obviously not only does it future-proof your company, because you obviously keep your best talent, obviously you keep them highly engaged because they're just thrilled, right? They know their careers are going to keep moving. And so it was a great lesson for me. And I must admit, you saw my earlier profile. That was probably the only company I was at that was so conscious when they were hiring people, right? They hired for talent and not just for skills. Now, I slipped in this word diversity. I mentioned this here because more and more, right? Well, globalization has been around for the longest time, but you realize that in an organization that tries, or in any company that wants to play in the global or regional, global, you need that, right? You need people who are different. One of the sad facts I'll call out here, and I'll be very open and candid, is that having worked in regional headquarters, especially in Singapore, is that, sometimes diversity is not as encouraged, right? For whatever reason, right? And I sometimes joke that, it's sort of the law of nature, right? And so when you have a particular leader that joins the region, right? Very soon, everybody else is about the same in the regional team, right? And I don't mean this in a bad way, right? I'm just saying that I think if you want to future-proof, I think you need to hire for diversity, people who are kind of different from you, right? Or think differently from you, right? And that's how I've seen companies sort of succeed when they do that. Okay, so that's the first, right? On the type of people you bring in. The second I've seen in future proving is about how do we then move people through the organization. I put in a couple of bullets there on learning innovations and performance conversation and career mobility. But maybe I'll just pick up one point, right, on learning innovations. At ST Engineering, this is going to be our third year that we're using LinkedIn Learning. And no, I do not have any stake in LinkedIn Learning, but I will just say that I think the face of learning, or the whole way we learn today, it's kind of changing and evolving, right? And largely it's because of digitization. Largely it's also because of social media. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I learn a heck of a lot, right? When I get a friend of mine sends me this link, right? Whether it was a TED talk or whether it was, and he say, hey, check this out, right? This speaker is talking about, it could be just 15 minutes, right? Amazing, right? I'm like, wow, right? I'm kind of blown away. The other day I turned on my LinkedIn Learning and I was going to go on a topic called unconscious bias. And it was a 23-minute program. So from where I stay in the West, and if I drive here to the HQ of ST Engineering in Ang Mo Kio, it takes me about 25 minutes. So I turned that on. And guess what? In 23 minutes, I sort of learned so much about unconscious bias. And it's just great reminders for me, right? So I just want to call this out that, as we sort of prepare people in your organizations for the future, right? You got to think about some of these components on how we help employees sort of continue to learn, and that's sort of changed, right? I would say that some organizations I've been through, there's still a view that it's generally classroom preferred and all that, but I think times have changed. I've had to challenge my own paradigm on how we learn. So I would say, think through it, right? How do you sort of develop your people? Because those are powerful, right? The way we sort of train people, the way we sort of move people's career, that's going to help your people be highly engaged, right, for the future. Now, if you look carefully at B, right, it says what? Learning, performance conversation, and career mobility. Those of you in HR would know this famous 70-20-10, right? What is 70? Experience. If you look carefully, that's all about career mobility, right? What's 20? Right? 20 is exposure or feedback. That's performance conversation, right? What's 10? Education and training, right? Which is exactly about learning. So I just noticed it, by the way. I just caught my eye that it's basically 70-20-10, right? Being sort of shared there. Okay. The other one is about removing and retaining. This is often a tough conversation. I would say that having been through different organizations, Accenture is one example that I remember fondly, because Accenture, just like most of the big four, like PwC, where I was from, they had a career philosophy called up or out, or I think the phrase could be up or on, right? Now, it's been a while since I've been in the big four, so I don't know what the philosophy is, but they had a very interesting view of telling employees, right, that, hey, we promise you a very swift career. I think those of you who have friends in KPMG or in Deloitte, those in the tax advisory or audit business, right? The brightest will make it to partner perhaps at the age of 35. I don't know if it's the same today, so I stand to be corrected, right? But for you to reach the pinnacle at 35 is quick. And in Accenture, we used to tell people that, yeah, you could make it to partner at 35, but on the correspondingly, we also need to share with you that if we do not assess that you're ready, right, at each milestone for promotion, we will have a conversation with you uh, uh, basically to say, let's part ways, right? And so it's culturally kind of accepted. And by the way, when we say part ways, it's not about giving you a package, right? It's just basically to say, hey, look, this is not really a career that probably fits you, blah, blah, blah. And, and so this up or on, right, or up or out is a very common philosophy, right, in moving careers in the Big Four, at least during my time. So, but it taught me a very precious lesson, because as I moved through different organizations, I also realized that I don't think anybody likes to be a bad guy, right? But it's very interesting to see how organizations, some of them that I've been, really prefer to protect employees, right? If you can't do this job, it's okay, right? We'll find you another job, right? Something that fits you. And to be honest, I'm very inclined to a philosophy like that. But as I say, I've seen two extremes, right? I don't think there's the right answer, because looking at the Accenture model, or even the PwC model, they're quite clear and proud that we keep the best and brightest. Asking you to exit is no reflection of your ability, right? It's just a reflection that it's not a work career that we think best fits you, right? And I want to safely say that being a HR in Accenture, yeah, I probably exited quite a few youngsters there. And remember, Accenture only takes, well, again, I have to caveat this was years back, but they used to only take consultants, right, or students who have a GPA of 3.5. To be honest, I don't think I had a GPA of 3.5, right? But they only take people with a GPA of 3.5. And the fact that most of them are smart cookies, right? And you have to exit some of them, shows you, or actually reflects to me, what a super high performing culture actually looks like. I'm sure it's probably worse in McKinsey, right? But you have organizations like this, right, where they make no apologies on saying we only keep the best. And all of you are bright, but there are clearly some that are brighter than others, even with a cohort like that, right? So they make no apologies. But I wanted to share this point because I think in organizations like that, right, I think I've seen how they future-proof themselves, right? Because in keeping just the very best, they sort of continue to be the top in their game. I'm not as close now to the professional services industry, but I still have very deep respects for Accenture as an organization, and I'll say this: I do know the employees that I exited. Let me tell you, some of them are CEOs today, right? Because they're just really good, right? And the reason when we have those conversations about them exiting, it's never about that they were not good, right? It's just not a fit, right? And we remind them, right? It's not a definition of your future. And I'm very proud to say that one of them just got announced as CEO. Obviously, I can't mention the name, but he didn't sort of make it in Accenture, but wow, right? So, but I just want to raise this point that if organizations are ready to do that, you do lift the game, right? On what it truly means to be a high performance culture. Okay, the other areas I thought would be an interesting one, because we're now starting to get into the engagement bit, right? And if you looked at commitment and contribution, those are two, I think, quite interesting areas, because it does sort of share or reflect, right, what it means for organizations to think through, right? How do you sort of provide an experience for your employees? Okay, so this is a mega subject in itself. I think employee engagement, you can spend a day just talking about it, right? What are the components and elements? But essentially what it's suggesting here is that any company, right, you got to think through the employee life cycle. Okay, so my family loves Japan. My kids just love Japan, right? And I sort of reflected why. And I realized why, because whenever you think of the word experience, right, what actually does it mean, right? It just hits your five senses, right? No, and it could be anything, right? It could be, some of you get a close call about your health, right? You had a health scare. Maybe, okay, let's talk about something positive, right? We went to Japan, and guess what? It hits your five senses, right? We went there during winter, so it's snowing. Yeah, you don't have snow in Singapore. The food's different. Your taste, or everything you eat tastes different. The language is different. The people are different. The sights are different. So it just hits your five senses, right? And these things you don't kind of forget. So, it's a good time. Sometimes I do reflect. Think of an employee, right? Joining your organization. When is his first experience? His first sort of high touch point, right? To be honest, the first is actually at the interviews, right? The whole impression of walking to the office, meeting the recruiter, meeting different, managers along the way. His first day in the office, right? Does he get his laptop or not? Right? His first journey into the company, right? What he sees, what he looks at, and the whole experience. And as you think through employees, right, as they go through, promotions, performance conversations, those are high touch encounters, right? Awards. I hate saying this, even exits, how you exit an employee, right? So think through that life cycle, because I think if you want to future-proof your organization, I think the whole idea is when you think through that life cycle, right? How is your company actually doing in those areas? How do you onboard new hires? What is the new hire experience, if anything, right? That's one reason why whenever we have awards and all these stuff and kickoff, right? It's a big thing, right? Because it's an experience. And until today, I would think very fondly of my time in HP, right, in Hewlett Packard. We have had some amazing employee events that until today sort of shaped my thinking, right? It kind of, sometimes I wake up thinking about it and still get that wow effect. And so these are things that, and we are all different, right? Our organizations are different, but it's something to think about. Right? Life cycle, where are high touch points, and how can we, sort of double down and enhance those experience, right? Because then employees sort of feel that attachment. Okay. And the last piece, I wouldn't play this up too much or too low, but purpose has been a big topic. It's something that you guys can find out a bit more, but more and more, right? I think companies are realizing, right? Bringing purpose back to the organization and to your your mission and vision statement, right, is starting to be really important. Okay. Okay, I'm just very conscious of time, so I just got just two more slides to go. Okay, the second area is on leadership, and I would just say this, that you've heard me share earlier how important it is in terms of having the right leaders. Now, through COVID, if you guys have not seen this, go check out the transcript or the speech made by the Marriott Hotel CEO. I can't remember his name now for my dear life, but the Marriott CEO and also the CEO for Airbnb, right? I picked up those two because obviously their organizations, their industries were significantly impacted and they had to downsize, right? I want you to look at the speech that they made. When I read that speech and I heard the Marriott CEO speak, right? Firstly, I will say that he had reflected everything that we talked about, right? The whole sense of purpose, right, of the organization. He was very open. He demonstrated high empathy about, what the company was going through, what every employee was going through, very similar to the Airbnb CEO. And I said, hey, every leader should be like that, right? Now, here comes the big question, right? How do we firstly articulate, right, what really are fundamental and core leadership competencies, right, of our leaders? I would say this, whenever I join an organization, one of the few things I would always ask for is, how would you describe a great leader in this company, right? Yeah, when I say, hey, this is a great leader, right? What does your company say about a great leader, right? And I think it's important to be able to articulate that. And it's equally important during this time now, with all the changes, right? How do we help our leaders sort of resonate with that competency that your company stands for? Okay, and for example, right, you saw some that I mentioned here about being digitally savvy and fostering diversity. Those are really real tenets. I don't know how many of you are familiar with DBS. I still have friends there. And if anything they said about PH Gupta, right, for the last 8 years was digital. In every speech he had, no, I'm exaggerating here, but clearly, right, he put a very clear message to the bank when he joined. We have to go digital. And today, if anything else, if you look at DBS, right, where they are today, right, it's amazing, right? I mean, they sort of stand out and stick out, right? So I'm just saying that I think each of us in our own organizations, we need to be able to articulate that, right? And some of the things that I put here too, right, on being a change expert, right? Because change is the order of the day, right? And what does it mean to lead change, right? What does it mean to lead through very difficult times? I would just put it out there for HR leaders. I think, to be honest, I've seen many of my leaders struggle, right? How do you tell your population that, hey, I need to fire 20% of you, but the rest of you who are staying, please stay because you're important, right? How do you sort of reconcile that, right? And I've seen many leaders struggle, my own leaders, right? How do you pass a message like that, right? And the industry that you are in is really tough, and at the same time, you've got to tell them, hey, look, I know it's tough, but hey, I need you to get out there and help us to grow the business. I mean, how do you do that, right? So I've seen sort of leaders tested, even myself. How do you engage your teams through very difficult times? By the way, I put the word tuner there because I just learned that VUCA, I think we all know VUCA, right? What is that? Volatile, uncertain, ambiguous. Now it's called tuna. So I think the terms have started to shift. T is now turbulent, N is now novel, right? The U and A remains the same. So I think, look, these are really uncertain times, and it's very interesting to ask questions, right? How do you sort of now build competencies that's going to prepare our leaders for the future? I must say that, I spent many years in IBM, and one of my most respected companies. I don't know if they do that today, but every 3 years, do you know IBM sort of revisits the leadership competencies, right? Because they believe that, yeah, the world keeps changing, and I want to believe that digital is now on the agenda, right? Because that's the new, that's how the world's moving. So it's something for you to think about, right? Your own organizations, how do you sort of keep moving that envelope, right, on leadership competencies? Because it is moving quickly. I remember if I hire a general manager 10 years ago, I remember the job description, and I look at the job description of a GM I hired today. Wow, pretty different, right? Because the demands have changed. Okay. And finally, I don't think I will, this is a point that we can avoid. But, obviously, in the last 1 year, I think many of my HR colleagues will have attended many roundtables on what is the future of work, right? What is the future of workplace, right? Everyone's working from home. There's an expectation. How is it really going to look like? And these have big implications, by the way. I think for multinationals, just to give you an example, if the world is truly digital today, I don't really need to hire people in Singapore, right? I could hire people in economies that, is half my labor cost, and still produce the same amount of work, because everyone's sort of so there are big sort of implications, right, on talent strategies, just thinking through the future of work. How do you also now encourage more connectivity if people are now working from home, right, more and more? Okay, so how do you sort of engender that? How do you sort of build culture, right, through a very digital kind of environment, right? So these are big challenges, and I think it's ones that we have to think about if we want to continue to future-proof. And I hate saying this, there's also big expectations. You know, I interview candidates today. Interestingly, some of the questions today are, am I able to work from home in this company? You know, and so it's interesting, right? Societal sort of values on companies are changing, and it's something we got to think about. I also just want to call out this topic on skills. I know it sounds like a very simple subject, but I also want to quickly call out that today, right, if I were to ask all of us, right, what capability do we have in our company? What skills do we actually have? I don't know how many of us can articulate. I'm not saying how many marketing people we have, how many sales people, right? But I'm asking specifically, right, skills, you know. And why this struck me was a couple of years back when I was in applied materials. It was during a strategy meeting, and the CEO turned to the HR team and say, "Hey, look, next year I like to move into 3D, laser technology, and I can't remember what's the third." So he looked at all of us and say, "Hey, HR team, do we know what is the skills repository? I mean, what skills do we have today? How many people have 3D skills or skills related to laser?" We were zipped, right? Now, I don't know how many of you here, your companies, right, actually keep a repository of skills that you have, right? It's a tough one. I've seen IBM do it when I was there. Clearly, the Big Four do it quite well. But you know, and the reason why I raise this is this, right? If you don't know what you have today, how are you going to prepare for the future, right? If you're going to think that, hey, I'm going to need this set of skills, right, in the next 2 to 3 years, right? For example, and this is not just technical skills, right? It could be any kind of skill, right? Okay, I want to break new markets, Indo-China and so on, right? What capability do I have of people who are experienced in building businesses overseas, you know, in that setup? Well, so it goes down to almost that kind of basics, but I wouldn't underscore that because unless you know your sort of where you are today, it can be quite tricky trying to project the future. Okay. With that, this is my last slide. I just want to sort of put it out there. This was the research done by Gartner. Just early, they published it early this year. It was something under CHRO leadership and so on. And I thought it was an interesting one, and I'll just put it out there. I mean, this is sort of what Gartner has researched in terms of what the business is saying, right, are going to be top HR priorities within companies in Asia Pac. Again, top on the list, critical skills. Interesting, right? We just talked about that, right? And the question is whether we're able to articulate that, right? There's also topics on organizational design, on change. We just talked about leadership, future of work, and employee experience. Okay, so with that, again, very respectful of time. I know Sean has another subject. So Sean, maybe can I pass this time back to you?
And, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Eugene. Okay, this is definitely very insightful for me. The words that strikes me, future workplace, I think is really, something that I can relate to it. Now, during the pandemic, I think the things that it really taught us is that we is really the case? Is it really beneficial to the employee? That's always a question in my mind. Okay, thank you, Eugene. Thank you for the wonderful sharing. And okay, I'm going to hand over the time to Kara Ho and Isabel for a quick briefing on the Graduate Diploma in HRM programs in SIM. So basically, Kara Ho, the senior managers from SIM, will talk on the admission criteria, the program structure, and also the exemptions. And Isabel Lee, the head of program in SIM, will also talk from the academic angle, like the curriculums of the program. So over to you, Kara and Isabel.
Thank you. So thank you, Eugene, for sharing on employee engagement. I think if you are a leader, I hope you will get some insights on how to future-proof the company by engaging talent management and providing purpose to your staff. Okay, develop the leadership competency and be agile so that the company can survive, sustain in tuna, that is turbulent, uncertain, novel, ambiguous world. Okay, so for employee, I learned from Eugene. So we need to know how to pivot, not only for the job itself, but 2 jobs ahead, so that we can retain as the best. Okay, so I'll be sharing with you how you can learn more HR theories, practice, and application from our GDHRM program. Just bear with me another 10 minutes time. I'll share screen now. Just hold on. Can you see my screen? Okay. So what I'm going to share with you, it would be on admission criteria, the progression, the program structure. Then Isabel will share with you the program unit details, followed by Q&A. Okay, so as I am offered the Graduate Diploma in Human Resource Management, GDHRM program that cover all the areas about recruitment, employee development, performance management, employment relations, employment law, and IHRM. Okay, so in order to get into the program, you need to be a degree graduate or a diploma holder who is 30 years of age with 8 years of working experience. Okay, then the qualification obtained in English will directly meet the English requirement for the graduate program. Okay, for those who graduate from the GDHRM, okay, they can actually progress to Warwick Master of Science program and SUSS Master program with exemptions. So you can see the chart from here with all the details. All these details is also on the web page. There are 3 terms in the GDHRM. So we have January, May, and September. The May intake is now open for application. So if you are very interested about Eugene's talk and want to learn more about HR practice, applications, and theories, do join us for the May intake. That is the immediate intake. Okay. There will be 2 modules per term. Okay. The classes mainly falls on Mondays and Wednesday, or sometimes it can be on Thursday, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., 3 hours per class. There are 13 lessons per module within 12 weeks. So for SIM grad program, we are having blended learning. So it means there will be 6 lessons face-to-face and 7 lessons online. The detailed schedule will be shared with the students before the term commences. But generally speaking, it will be the first 5 lessons, it will be face-to-face, followed by 7 lessons online. Then the last lesson will be a face-to-face to wrap up the module. So the course fees, you can see from here. So the module fee is 963. The program fee is 5778 in 3 installments. So the students is just required to pay for the module fee or the term fee before the term start. For each module, there will be 2 assignments and they will be due on Sunday, so that if for working adults like us, we can burn our midnight oil on Friday or Saturday and then submit our assignment on Sunday. Yeah. So for the GDHRM, there are 3 exam modules and 3 test modules. So you can see the structure here, the timeline. So normally, let's say we look at the May intake. So is end May, then you will have 1 assignment due. End June is the test. End July, it will be the exam. So it's about 4 weeks, then you will have 1 assignment due. So as I mentioned, each term, there will be 1 exam module and 1 non-exam module, that is a test module. So if it is a test module, you will have it in the 2nd month. If it is an exam module, you will have it at the end of the term. Okay, so each module there are 2 assignments. Okay, so these are the passing rate. Of course, 50 is the passing rate, and it is quite easy to achieve it if you submit your assignment in time. Okay. But of course, just now I also mentioned if you want to progress to SUSS Master, with exemptions, you need to obtain certain GPA. It's a GPA of 2.4, so it's like a C plus for all the modules as an average. Okay, I'll hand over to Miss Isabel. She is our head of program and she will share with you more about the module itself. Isabel, over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Clara. So thank you for all your patience. We are very close to wrapping up, but then just give me a few more minutes to walk you through our program. As you can see on screen, we have 6 modules in this GDHRM program, and we cover managing organizational change and development, employment relations and law, performance management and rewards, international human resources management, strategic human resources management, staffing and employee development. So if you are joining us in this coming May, you will start off with performance management and rewards and international human resources management, and then you will progress. So it depends on when you join us, and then therefore you will just go into the module that's conducted in that tri-semester. We have curated this program specifically to enhance your competency if you are looking forward to join the human resources professional field. And if you are also thinking that you like to have the ability to future-proof your business, this is probably also a very exciting time for you to join us and future-proof your ability to acquire talent, engage talent, and to actually align your talent to your business goals. So we are not only a suitable program if you're looking at joining human resources management as an employee, but we also highly recommend this for potential for employers who are looking to better manage your staff, right? And like Clara have mentioned, we have continuous assessment as well as exam modules, but I want to reassure you that our lecturers are very conscious and very in touch with our student population. They were actually, they have designed the program suitable for working adults in mind. So do not worry. And not only that, most of our lecturers, like Mr. Eugene himself, we actually have a lot of experienced lecturer, not only just in the teaching field. Our lecturers are actually experts in the human resources management with many years of HR practice to share with you in class. We encourage our students to actually bring their real world working issues, talent issues, succession planning issues, or trends in the coming decade for the future of work. All these issues are very relevant, and given that we are all adult students, we will actually learn from each other, not just learn from our lecturer, but we also bring our issues to class and learn from each other. So if you were to ask me, how do you future-proof yourself in terms of competency? I think the answer may be in lifelong learning, and joining us in this program can be part of your lifelong learning journey. All right, next slide. Like I mentioned, we always emphasize on bringing industry expert to our program, especially for our graduate diploma, because we know that the value is not just in a textbook. Otherwise, you could easily Google and the answers will be provided by Mr. G himself. But we bring to the classroom and we bring you to the industry through all this connection via our experts. We invite keynote speaker like Mr. Eugene Lam himself, and we also recently have Mr. Rajan, who also came to campus to talk to our students on the organizational changes that has happened during this COVID period and how it had impacted career opportunities, not only today, but in the future. So we are all working together to make sure that our talent pool here, referring to you, will be kept abreast of the development. All right. So next, Clara. So here you are going to be introduced to a few of our successful stories. We have students who have graduated from our program and currently holding human resources management role. For example, you are looking at Derek Tan. He's an HR manager. He graduated from our program in 2018, and he is currently the public transport department, HR manager in the public transport company. All right, next we have Mr. Xiong himself. Okay, he's an HR business partner in Austin Maritime Services. So we are really proud of our students who are able to put all this HR knowledge and new acquired skills to work. And we often will touch base with our graduate students, and we are in the process of building a stronger graduate alumni so that we could often have you come back to network with each other. I think, if anything, one of the things that I learned from my own HR career is the value of networking. Because you never know, perhaps you are sitting right next to the CHRO, and there goes your network will bring you to another new opportunity. Maybe the 2 jobs ahead. All right. Okay, next. We are at the end of our slide.
I hope everyone enjoyed the masterclass, and thank you for spending your Thursday evening with us. So please feel free to email us or call us. Otherwise, thank you and have a great evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Bye. Thanks.